you had an exam and you kind of know what to expect. The first question on the exam is a give me. Most of you did pretty well, but do remember that on the Canvas page, the course Canvas page under modules, there's that one file that says, okay, the first question on each one of these exams is gonna be, right? And the first question for the next exam on waterfowl is all of the higher taxa, so they're all in class AVs. It's all order and seriformes. I ask for the family Anatidae, and then you have 1, 2, 3 subfamilies, right? And I ask for those. I ask for the tribes, which is a designation used. There's okay, a designation used kind of below between subfamily. Between subfamily and genus. Guys, in waterfowl, there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of people doing research on waterfowl since it's a migratory species. It's these are or migratory group, and there's a lot of very enthusiastic hunters. There's a lot of federal and state money and international money that goes into their management. There's a lot of research, and because of all that research and interest, there's debate about the taxonomy, and that taxonomy is ever changing. So different people have different beliefs about how they should be classified. What I give you is a pretty common way. The sheet that I provided on the Canvas page is a pretty common way of doing it. But just understand that not every scientist will necessarily agree with this way, and it'll probably change a little bit in the coming years as we do more and more sophisticated genetic analysis. Okay, but this is a pretty good way of doing it. Since there are so many species, I only ask for you to give me one example of a species from each tribe on the test. Okay, so and just the common name is good enough. But I do provide on the handout all the species, common names, and scientific names, and do with that what you will. But what we're going to do today is what we did with that first day of mammals. It's going to be species accounts, and I'm going to blow through them pretty quickly. I have just under 75 minutes to get through about 65 or so slides, so I'm going to move pretty quick. And just like on the first one, most of this information I'm providing you don't really need to know for the exam. But I hope that you're interested in this. Some of you have a pretty good understanding and knowledge of the waterfowl, of the different species. And for a lot of you, you probably aren't really aware of how they're grouped and all the different species and where they are and stuff. So I hope that this will be interesting to you. So largely, you can just soak this in, let this wash over you. Know that the main exam stuff from this is going to be the higher taxa, right? The order, family, subfamilies, tribes, and such. Okay? All right. Any questions before I get started on this? So after this, I'm going to talk about waterfowl management next Tuesday, and then next Thursday, Freddie, our state waterfowl biologist is going to come visit with the class, and I'm trying to blank on his name at the moment. It's on the syllabus. And he's going to talk about waterfowl management in the state of Tennessee. That'll be next Thursday. So you guys did an awesome job asking our last speaker questions. So thank you for that, and please continue to do that. That's great. That shines a really positive light on you and okay. All right. So we're going to start out with this group of ducks that really fits in more with the geese. These are, and I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here when I say the subfamily is called Dendrosignini, and dendro is the Latin root for what? Tree. So these are often called the tree ducks, okay, or perching ducks. And you've got a couple different species of whistling ducks. This species we've been seeing, typically it's been a more southern species. Most of the waterfowl I'm going to cover today are more in North America. These tend to be more in South America and Central America, but we have been seeing them move up into Tennessee and this area, this region of the United States, more in recent years. Let me just ask, who's a pretty avid duck hunter? Okay, 3 of you, excellent. Okay, so good to know. So you guys will know a little bit of what, you'll have probably more familiarity with some of the things I'm talking about. So you see the black-bellied has the black belly, and the full-vised whistling duck has the more the reddish or rust-colored belly. You see the more southern species, the full-vised whistling duck. You know, we've started seeing a little bit more breeding in the southern U.S., but even on up into Tennessee at times in recent years. Okay. And like I said, those are in with the geese, and whereas the whistling ducks in the subfamily Dendrosignini and tribe Dendrosignini, the geese are in the subfamily Anserininae in the tribe Anserini, okay? And so these are the true geese rather than the broader group of geese. And this is a goose that is a popular game species around here. It's called the white-fronted goose. It's a dark goose. The white front refers to the white on the front of the face, but they're often called by goose hunters around here speckle belly because of the speckling on the belly of the goose, or I've heard them referred to as speck. And those colloquial names can get confusing because if you talk to an outdoor enthusiast in East Tennessee and they say that they're out after speck, they're after brook trout. so speck can mean very different things there. So that's the white-fronted goose, and among the geese, this is one of our more southern geese that we see a good bit in the deep south, but they've been fairly common in certainly Arkansas and a little bit in West Tennessee. All right. Many of you are familiar with snow geese, but there is a goose that looks a lot like a snow goose, but it's a little bit smaller with a shorter bill, called a Ross's goose. And what you see here is 2 Ross's geese and 2 snow geese, okay? These 2 upper geese are Ross's geese, and the 2 lower geese are snow geese. You can see that the 2 upper, this one's a little bit smaller than that one, this one's a little bit smaller than that one, shorter bill than this one, shorter bill than this one, okay? So they look pretty similar. And mostly what you're going to see around here is snow geese. Snow geese come in a couple different subspecies, greater and lesser snow geese. Greater snow geese tend to spend more time farther north. What we get down here in the southeast is more lesser snow geese, and we have, as many of you know, a lot of them. Their numbers were really low a century ago, but agricultural practices have really favored them, so they've become a real problem species. And they've, as some of you are aware, they've, over the past, over a decade, 15 years, 20 years, greatly expanded hunting seasons and bag limits and methods that we can use to hunt them that are not allowed on other species of waterfowl. And be very destructive upon their breeding range and in agricultural areas. How many of you have been, out near the Mississippi or Reelfoot Lake and seen one of these funnel clouds that has thousands, maybe sometime over 10,000 or more, and just phenomenal numbers. We can frequently see in the wintertime. So really neat geese. Now you'll also see that some of these geese have a white body, okay? They all have black wingtips, but some have a white body and some have dark on the body, okay? So both Ross's geese and snow geese, much more often snow geese, can come in a dark phase that we often call the blue phase. So a blue goose is a dark phase snow goose. There can be a dark phase Ross's goose, a blue Ross's goose, but that's much less common. It's very uncommon, okay? Good? How we doing? So there's the range of the Ross's goose. Like I said, most of the geese have a more northern distribution than the white-fronted goose. Come on down to the southern United States, and not Ross's goose tends to be more of a western species than a lot of the snow geese, but they do mix in with the snow geese, and we will get them in Tennessee occasionally. And then there's the snow goose, white phase, dark phase, or blue goose phase. Like I say, both greater and lesser snow geese are 2 different subspecies of the same species. Greater tends to be a little bit bigger, it tends to be more northern. What we get down here tends to be, more of the lesser snow geese down here. Okay. A species we don't see much at all. It has a much more northern and oceanic distribution. We see it more on the coast. Is a brant. For those of you that are not aware, the scientific name, the genus name of a lot of our geese, the Canada goose, is Branta canadensis. So brant refers to not just the brant but others, but the common name of this one is the brant, and it has a much more northern distribution, and we see it in our oceans. Okay, so not a species that typically comes to Tennessee. Migratory species, though, they can end out anywhere, and sometimes we have species that are from Eurasia that plop down in Tennessee. So it's rare for some of them, but sometimes you'll see them. This is an example of a species that's not common at all in North America. This species occasionally makes its way to our coasts, and every now and then when has made its way into Tennessee, and that's the barnacle goose. But you see just a little bit on the Atlantic coast. It's much more northern species and has distributions across Greenland into Europe, northern Europe. So it's a northern on both sides of the Atlantic. Seldom down here and very seldom in Tennessee. Okay. And this is a Canada goose. Is it Canadian?
No.
How do you know?
Because you yell at people when they say that.
No, I don't.
That's
I say, are you sure?
No, Grubon is.
Grubon yells. It might be Canadian. What makes a Canada goose Canadian? If it migrates to Canada. That would be a Canadian Canada goose, right? But if it's a resident Canada goose that doesn't go up to Canada, then it's just a Canada goose. It's not Canadian, okay? So let me talk a little bit about that resident migrant thing, all right? Once upon a time, all the subspecies of Canada geese across North America were all considered the same species, Canada goose. But several years ago, the subspecies that were in the western part of our country that tend to be much smaller and have a much higher pitched vocalization were separated out into their own species called the cackling goose. Now they look just like Canada geese. They just tend to be smaller. So there's several species of the cackling goose out west, and several subspecies of cackling goose, several subspecies of the Canada goose. These two that I have outlined in yellow are the two main subspecies that we see in Tennessee, okay? Now, the main one that we have traditionally had in Tennessee is the interior Canada goose, or Todd's, or Hudson Bay Canada goose, and that's often called the Mississippi Valley population. It migrates down along the Mississippi Valley. Pretty widely distributed, broadly distributed subpopulation, okay? Some of you have heard in another class that I teach a story of another subspecies, the giant Canada goose, Branta canadensis maxima, that we thought was extinct, but a kid in Nashville in the 1960s in Nolensville, back then when it was a common thing for kids to incubate eggs and raise like game farm birds and such. Ordered a bunch of eggs from a mail order company in North Carolina. They sent them to him, he hatched them, and it turned out they were this subspecies, the giant Canada goose we thought were extinct. That brood grew out into, and mixed probably, with some migratory birds, grew out into a huge resident flock that originated in Nashville. And it was in the 1980s that I think I was in high school that they opened the first hunting season on that flock. That's called, whereas the interior is called the Mississippi Valley population, this is often called the Tennessee Valley population, okay? Yeah, and let's see. Let me see if I can get sound on this. I did try to link. It's not going to do it, is it? Well, you can Google up the, oh, okay. It's just slow. Maybe it'll work. Oh God, no.
Enable extension.
Enable extension. Okay, sure. This might not work. Oh, it might. It does work. That's cackling geese. Okay. So it sounds a little bit like Canada geese, but a much higher pitch. You got it. You got the technology. Yeah, you got it. You're welcome. And I wrote the rest of it.
Where'd you go?
So there, what's that?
You look like a pro.
Sure, I do not look like a pro. I look surprised that it worked as well. So you see, as you get farther west, that those individuals tend to be smaller, much smaller. This whole broad range here is the migration corridor, kind of the population expanse of the interior, the Mississippi Valley population, that migratory population we've always had. The giant Canada goose has tended to have a more narrow distribution, but that population, since it was raised without parents teaching them how to migrate in Middle Tennessee, it's a sedentary population, and that happens anytime that we have a population that we move somewhere else and we raise it. If it doesn't have parents showing it how to migrate, it'll tend to be a sedentary population of whatever species. We've seen it with swans and geese and cranes and others. Speaking of swans, we have 3 species of swan in North America. 2 of them are native. This one is not. This is the mute swan. This is the species of swan that the Queen of England, is considers her own special species. But it's a very ornate-looking bird. This swan has an orange bill. The other ones have black bills. Our native species have black bills, and it has a few isolated populations where it's been introduced. Okay, and those are not migratory populations. They're sedentary populations. This is our trumpeter swan, a large swan with a black bill. And I want you to notice that black extends from the bill to the eye. And that colored patch, in this case black patch, between the bill and the eye is called the lores, L-O-R-E-S. And it's the color of the lore is how we distinguish this, our native trumpeter swan, from the other swan, the tundra swan. The trumpeter swan was in past decades in great decline. It was a threatened species. But we've had several decades of pretty hard work reestablishing it and reestablishing its habitat, and it's off the threatened species list and continuing to recover, doing better. Okay, so this is the trumpeter swan, and a lot of the populations are sedentary, non-migratory, because we've trapped them and moved them to new places where they used to be. And when we do that, unless we teach them how to migrate, they no longer migrate. We do still have some populations over here near the coast that are migratory, and they typically migrate out to the ocean, okay, out to the coast, right? And then you've got the tundra swan, and notice that they have that lore, that yellow patch between the beak and the eye, that's yellow, unlike the trumpeter. A little bit smaller for the female, and otherwise pretty similar looking swan. I think the trumpeter is a little bit bigger, but that's very difficult to know unless you have 2 side by side. That could be a male and a female, so it's kind of hard to know which is which if you don't see that yellow. And the tundra swan has had the broader distribution. If we see swans in Tennessee, which isn't too terribly common, but when we do, it's more likely that trumpeter swan. The tundra swan. Okay, we're out of the swans and we're into the ducks now. So I kind of blew over the geese and swans collectively, I think I mentioned, are in the subfamily Anserininae. And the 2 tribes, the true geese were the Anserini, and this is on your review sheet, and the swans are Cygnini. Okay, so the genus is Cygnus. Okay, now we're into the subfamily Anatinae, all right, which is the surface feeding and diving ducks. All right, the first we're going to get into is the tribe Anatini, which is the surface feeding ducks. And we also describe those as dabbling ducks, marsh ducks, puddle ducks. They have a lot of names. So take some time understanding these categorical levels on the sheet that I provide you, okay? Now this is the first, and this is the symbol of our Wildlife Society, because not only is it a very popular game bird, but it's considered by many one of the most colorful, beautiful birds
in the world with regard to the male and its breeding plumage, which is seen in the foreground. And so it's also sought by wildlife watchers. But it has another couple interesting characteristics. One is that most ducks that we have in Tennessee, we have here in the wintertime. This, of course, some of you are aware, is a species that's here year-round, okay? Now, wood ducks, some of them will be resident, some will be migratory. But what you have is a broad continent-wide distribution, and that migratory is like this. So we might have some species that leave, or individuals that leave Tennessee, but others that come into Tennessee. And we might have some that never leave at all. So that it's a mixed migration pattern, and some don't migrate at all. Since this species has made a comeback, it was heavily exploited and its habitats were destroyed in the 1800s and early 1900s. We worked real hard bringing it back, largely by putting out wood duck nesting boxes, and that's worked very successfully. It's a cavity nester, okay? So it's got a couple interesting things going for it. It's resident, it's here in the summer, and it's a cavity nester. So since it's made a great comeback, and it's here earlier than most ducks get here, and a lot of ducks get here like around November or so, later in the fall, it's already here now. It's been here all summer. A lot of hunters are interested in hunting it earlier than other ducks. So a lot of states have petitioned the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, responsible for setting waterfowl season harvest. Can we have an early season for wood ducks? And the Fish and Wildlife Service's response is, only if you can provide us information, data, that your hunting is sustainable, that it's not overly impacting the population. 3 states have chosen to accept that challenge and to provide that data, and those states are Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. And so we have an early wood duck season here in Tennessee. Now, like I said, most ducks migrate in November, but there are a couple species that migrate much earlier, that we have migrating around September, like now. Who can tell me what those are that we include with the wood duck season? Yeah, blue-wing and green-wing teal. So I'll get to teal later, but so that early wood duck season that we have for about a week here in September includes teal as well. Okay, so they're all three pretty small ducks. Teal are just fast-flying little bullets. I'm going to show you several pictures of duck wings. Biologists often have wing bees, ask hunters to turn in duck wings in some places to identify how many adult and juvenile, male and female of each species are harvested. I'm not going to, for the most part, I'm not going to ask you about these. And the juvenile it takes a lot of study to figure out how to tell a juvenile from an adult. And sometimes it takes a lot of study to tell a female from an adult. So I show you these just so you can see them. I'm not going to charge you with them. I will point out on this one particular one, and some of you have seen this in another class. This is a wing of an adult male. See that white stripe? This is a wing of an adult female. Instead of a white stripe, those feathers have teardrop-shaped white patches. And that's how biologists can easily distinguish a male from a female wing, or even for a whole bird, because sometimes when the male goes into eclipse plumage, it's not that colorful. It looks more similar to a female. Ducks, a lot of species of duck, not all, but a lot of them have a patch of colored feathers on their wing. Who remembers from another class the name for that colored patch? It's called a speculum, S-P-E-C-U-L-U-M, a speculum. And that can be helpful in identifying the species, the age, the sex of the individual. All right? Just as a quick review, a reminder to some and new information for others. If I refer to different wing feathers on the wing, these outer feathers, these long outer feathers that are kind of sickle-shaped, curved feathers on the wings of birds, are called flight feathers, and the outer 10 flight feathers, actually all of these from here out are flight feathers, but these outer 10 are called the primary flight feathers. The formal technical term for those is remiges, so the primary remiges, but most people call them flight feathers.
These are called the secondary flight feathers. And then these little feathers up here that cover the bases of the primaries and the secondaries are called coverts. C-O-V-E-R-T-S. These are the primary coverts and the secondary coverts. So usually the speculum is on the secondary flight feathers. Sometimes it extends up into the secondary coverts as well, okay? So for woodies, it's mostly just a little bit of blue iridescence in those secondary flight feathers. And there's the range of wood ducks, and you can see for most of the eastern United States, they're year-round residents. So they're widespread. They've made a great comeback in the last century because we put wood duck nesting boxes out and they respond very well to that. Wood ducks are known to be dump nesters, and what that means is if you put their boxes too close together, one female will lay a clutch of eggs in her box, and then she'll go to somebody else's box and lay a clutch of eggs, or lay a few eggs in another female's clutch. So another female might have 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 eggs, and this female with her own clutch here might go over and lay 3 or 4 or 5 more. If she has extra energy resources and extra eggs to lay, and it's more than she might be able to take care of, evolutionarily that pays off to, hey, have somebody else raise my genes. You know, if it works, it works. So the way that we combat that, because we don't want to lower the chance of success of any of the clutches, is don't let those nests get too close together. So we keep the nesting boxes, you know, spread apart. We don't let them, you know, we don't want them to be 10, 20, 30 yards apart, like 50, 100 yards apart. Minimizes dump nesting. Okay. Well, we're still here in the puddle ducks, and the mallard is the most popular duck species to waterfowl hunters. Okay, the male mallard, the drake, is often called the greenhead because the head. Traditionally, the female mallard has been called the Susie, mallards. Female mallards can look a little bit like the female black duck. The male black duck doesn't look like the mallard. It doesn't have the green head. But you see the females have orange beaks. The male black duck has a black beak. Male mallard has more of a yellow beak usually. And the black duck has gone through some pretty significant declines in recent decades. And in parts of Canada on the breeding range where black ducks have trouble finding mates, they will interbreed with mallards. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of duck species that will interbreed with each other, even across taxonomic barriers that we thought would prohibit it. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of people are arguing that this taxonomic structure that I provide might not be the most accurate one, because there's a lot of crossbreeding. So there's the range of the mallard. The range of the black duck is a more eastern species, and they're both very popular, but the mallard is the king of species that we duck hunt for. So the mallard speculum, that's the classic duck speculum right there. Okay, it's blue with black and white on the outside. The black duck does not have the white on the outside. So the black duck is here. So it's blue with the black, but no white, okay, for both the hen and the drake. So mallard, black duck. Know that. Okay. All right, then you get into the widgeons. We have one American widgeon that's pretty common, and we have a Eurasian widgeon that's a very occasional species that we don't usually see here, but occasionally it'll show up. The males look very different. The Eurasian widgeon has that rusty head. The American widgeon has that big green eye stripe, and the top of the head is white, and therefore old-time hunters often call the American widgeon a bald head, because it looks bald-headed. And so that's a popular puddle duck. And there's the range, widespread American widgeon across our continent. The Eurasian widgeon we see more on our coastal areas, Pacific and Atlantic flyways. We haven't reviewed this yet, but waterfowl migrate primarily along 4 main channels: the Atlantic, we call it flyway, the Pacific flyway, the Mississippi flyway, and then a very broad kind of decentralized flyway called the Central or Mountain flyway. Okay, and so and then the ducks that migrate down along the Mississippi flyway, some of them might breed over here on Hudson's Bay, some of them might breed out there in Alaska, and they all just kind of funnel down into a more narrow and narrow channel. So there's the adult male American widgeon. The speculum is green with black, kind of iridescent green-black, but you have a broad white patch on the secondary coverts. That huge broad white patch is very indicative with the green. You seldom see Gardani here in the United States. This is not a North American species, but every now and then you will see them. It has the eye stripe like the widgeon, but it's white instead of green. And what have I done? Broken it. So we see them sometimes on the Pacific and Atlantic coast, but they're not common. We don't see them in Tennessee very often at all. A species we see very frequently in Tennessee is called the gadwall, and because of that gray flank and gray head on the male, hunters a lot of the time call it a grade up. It's pretty descriptive. If you look, you can see this rust and black and white on the wing, and you'll see that expressed in the speculum. Okay, so rust, black and white. Oh, sorry, there's the range. Continent wide, it's very common, and there's that rust and black and white expressed on the speculum of the gadwall. Okay, the spoonie, by beginners, sometimes they take one quick glance, they think it's a mallard, and because as the male has the green head, but the mallard doesn't have that white breast, so that's easy to tell. And it's kind of hard to tell in profile here, but the beak is a very broad, what we call a spatulate-shaped or spoon-shaped beak, used for sifting benthic organisms and such. And so a lot of people call it a spoonbill or a spoonie. I've heard some young hunters call them Hollywood mallards or Hollywood, 'cause it looks like a mallard that's had liposuction and it's
always smiling.
What's that?
It's always smiling.
Always smiling, yeah. So not as, they're quite common, they're very common. Some folks don't think they taste as good as mallards. I think they're fine. Yeah, I think they taste just fine. I have actually one person nodding and one person shaking their head, so that's kind of fun. But I like them just fine. And so they have a very wide distribution. They do very well here in West Tennessee. Lots of them. And they can look like a mallard when you look at the male in breeding plumage, but if you just look at the wing, some people make the mistake, novices make the mistake of thinking that that's a blue-winged teal, because so you see that blue on the secondary coverts at the top of the speculum. But if you were to hold that wing next to the wing of a teal, a blue-winged teal wing is much smaller, okay? A teal is a much smaller bird. So the shoveler is a good size, a pretty big-bodied bird like a mallard. But the teal are tiny. So there's the American male. So green with that white wedge shaped, and then the blue, that kind of powder blue on the coverts. Here's another really popular species among hunters. Another puddle duck is the northern pintail. It has that long central tail feathers, particularly the male, that give the nickname sprig. The male is often called a bull sprig, and it has that very distinctive chocolate-covered head with that white breast and the stripe that goes up the back of the head. And their numbers have declined a little bit, and sometimes in places, so we put some conservation measures in place, so it's been kind of variable. Some years they've done better, some years they've done a little bit worse. But they do have a continent-wide distribution. We've always and commonly had them here in Tennessee. There's the male, adult male, white with green with a kind of a tawny or rust color at the top of the spectrum. And then here's the little teal. These, the teal are the last of the surface feeding ducks, of the Anatini, of the little dabblers.
The teal are smaller than a lot of these ducks that I've showed you. The wood duck is smaller too, but the teal are smaller ducks. We have a third species of teal that I'll show you in a moment called the cinnamon teal, but it's more out west. We don't see it here in the east much, hardly at all. But this is the green winged teal with that cinnamon colored head and the big green stripe behind the eye, and the blue winged teal with kind of the bluish gray head and big teardrop shaped white in front of the eye. And they both have pretty wide distributions, common in Tennessee, especially the blue wing around here during that early season. This is the male green wing with the green and black, and the male blue wing. That blue is like that, a little bit like that shoveler that I mentioned, but again, it's a much smaller wing. And this is the cinnamon teal out west, so just full cinnamon colored head and flank and breast for the breeding male, and they're more western species, so we don't usually see it here in the east. Okay, now we get into the next group, which is the diving ducks, and I break that into about 3 different tribes. The first is the Ithiini, which is the bay ducks. Sometimes some people call them the poachards, okay? And a lot of the bay ducks are smaller bodied ducks, but this one is different. This is a great big duck, and has long been prized by hunters, and that's the canvasback. Now the canvasback is a big duck. It looks a little bit like another duck that's a good bit smaller. This is the redhead, okay? And they're both in that same group of poachards or bay ducks. But you see, the redhead, the black breast, the light gray flank and back on both birds. But the difference is, A, the canvasback is a lot bigger, okay? Second, the canvasback has a black beak and very distinctive. You can see this easily in profile from a distance. Kind of that long Roman sloping nose, okay? Whereas with the redhead, it has a very steep forehead, and that bill comes out at a sharp angle, and it's not a black bill, it's a light blue bill with some black and white on it. Okay, so canvasbacks, we've practiced conservation measures on them because they're a big, popular duck to hunt, and at times and places they've done well, but a lot of the time they've kind of suffered in recent decades. The redhead has done better. The redhead is it's a nest parasite, like a brown-headed cowbird. It'll lay its eggs in the nests of other species. That's we like them though because they're a game bird, but that is an interesting characteristic of them. So both of them have broad ranges across the U.S. Canvasbacks have kind of suffered. Redheads are doing pretty well. All right, now we get into these smaller bay ducks like the redhead, the ringneck duck, then I'm going to show you a couple of scops, greater and lesser scop. The ringneck duck is named for a very faint ring, a broad rust-colored ring around the neck that's very difficult to see. That a lot of the time you don't even see it. So a lot of people get confused, like, well, why do you even call it that? Well, I don't know. The taxonomists did it because it was there. But you see a dark head, a dark back, a dark breast, a white or light gray flank that pops up right here just a little bit in the ringneck duck. That pop-up doesn't occur there in the scops that I'm about to show you. That is a male that you can see that kind of rust-colored ring around the neck. That's what it's named after. It's very difficult to see, and in the right light you often don't. In the wrong light you often don't see it. Okay. Good. Right. The ringneck duck is often called by hunters around here. I think they call it jack. Is that what they're still calling it these days? Yeah. And I grew up hunting ducks in Middle Tennessee, and we never called them jack back then. So it's a West Tennessee thing. So a wide distribution, a common duck, popular among hunters. And then these are the scop, the greater scop and the lesser scop. And boy, when I was in undergraduate school trying to tell those guys apart, I used to try to imagine. I think the greater scop has a green iridescence to the head, and the lesser scop doesn't. And I'm like, no, you can't. No. Kind of difficult to tell them apart, but so a lot of people just group them and collectively call them scop or bluebill. Okay, but that white flank
This kind of I don't know what you call it, vermiculated black and white gray pattern on the back versus the ringneck duck, which has a black back. Okay, so black back on the ringneck duck, that gray back on the male of the scaup, and they often call it a bluebill. So it has that. So the range of the greater scaup is you see it's a more northern species that's not as frequent in Tennessee. The lesser scaup ranges on down into Central America and even into South America just a little bit. So all other things being equal, probably what we have is a lesser scaup here. And then the goldeneye, and of the two goldeneye, and then we are now in the sea ducks. Okay, so several sea ducks, the tribe Mngmt, which is the mergansers. So these are in with the mergansers. We have common goldeneye here. We seldom see Barrow's goldeneye. It's a much more northern species that seldom makes it to Tennessee. Common, the male has these black stripes that extend to the white and just a little spot in front of the eye. The Barrow's, that spot is teardrop shaped on the male, and those black stripes is more white spots that go back. So that's pretty distinctive difference, but they all have that bright yellow eye that gives them the name goldeneye. That's the common goldeneye that's common in Tennessee. There's the Barrow. I said more northern, but no, it's more western, isn't it? Sorry about that. So we seldom see it here. So there's three main species of mergansers that we have in Tennessee. And one of them, some people will look at the head and get it mixed up with another little sea duck called the bufflehead. But they're very different, and it's obvious to tell. The bufflehead is white on the breast and flank, white and light gray, and the hooded merganser is dark on the flank. So very different. The hooded merganser also has this white on the side of the head, on both sides of the head, but a little black. Call it mohawk, call it what you want. And the bufflehead, that white extends all the way around the back of the head with no black mohawk over the middle. Okay, so the both pretty common species, and I don't think they're sought heavily by hunters, but hunters will take them. And the mergansers, both the hooded and the other two that we're going to see in a minute, the common and the red-breasted merganser, have very narrow bills, very narrow. So there's the range. Bufflehead is all throughout. Hooded merganser tends to be more of an eastern species, and you see that this has can have a year-round distribution. So we do have some hooded mergansers that will nest throughout the year and stay resident here in Tennessee. And there's the bigger mergansers, larger than the hooded, is the common and the red-breasted. You can easily see the difference between them, but a red bill and the red-breasted also has that crest on the back of the head. You see a little bit of that in the female there, but that male doesn't show it. Shows that the red-breasted merganser migrates through Tennessee. The common, it doesn't show that it's in Tennessee as much, but we frequently get them in Tennessee. They're not uncommon. And then we get into, wow, I thought this was going to take a lot longer. I was blowing through this. Okay. And then we get down to the, oh no, we're not there yet, are we? Okay, yeah. So the long-tailed and the harlequin duck, I was getting these mixed up with the stiff-tails, yeah. So these are a couple of tiny little ducks that you usually see out on open water. You don't see them on closed water as much. You often see them on the oceans. The long-tailed duck is here, and the harlequin duck is a beautiful little male and breeding plumage here. That's what I was talking about earlier, is the more northern distribution. We don't usually see them this far south. And another few species that we don't usually see in Tennessee, but occasionally, is the scoters. And the three main scoters we have, that we might occasionally have, are the surf, which is top left, with that big crazy beak. The white-winged, which just has that white stripe on the wing when the wing's closed, and the black scoter, which is all black except for that hood ornament that it's got. And I've looked up what's the name for those bumps on the beaks, and I've never found a real term for those. Sometimes they call them, you got a name for it?
I said the snood ornament.
The snood, yeah, like the turkey guys do, yeah. But I think they believe that those are used to kind of reinforce that area of the beak when they're shoveling around in substrate for food. So I don't know. But the bright color is no doubt used by males as a breeding ornament as well. So there's the range again, more northern species that we don't usually get down here in Tennessee. Anybody seen any scoters while you've been out hunting ever?
I know people that have shot at some. But
Yeah.
that's always on the river.
Yeah, they're more open water. Yeah. And then really crazy phenyter, we very, very seldom have in Tennessee. It's a much more northern species, very northern species. We get in Arctic in its distribution. And that's the male with the really crazy nuptial decoration on the beak. So very northern distribution on the keener. All right, and these are I think our last two, and these are the tribe is Oxyarene, the stiff-tailed ducks, the stiff-tails, the masked duck. I'm sorry, these photos are not good. There's not a lot of great photos of them out there. The masked duck is top left, and the ruddy duck, which is more common, bottom right. We occasionally see those here. The masked just has little spots of distribution. They don't have a large migration corridor. The ruddy duck more, but it does dip down into Central America, but it's pretty common in West Tennessee. I blew pretty fast through that. I was reviewing notes earlier, and I thought I was going to struggle to make it an hour and 15 minutes. So sorry I went fast, but I think for some of you that was, you were pretty familiar with a lot of that. I hope it filled in some gaps. For some of you that aren't familiar with the ducks, I hope that was useful. But what I really encourage you to do pretty soon, pretty quick here, I have made this available online. Go ahead and download that Waterfowl of Tennessee sheet. And be paying attention to those subfamilies and the tribes and where the breakoffs are between those subfamilies and tribes, okay?
We need to know one for the test, one for each
One from
tribe.
each tribe, one common name from each tribe. Yeah, that's right.
Very nice of you.
What's that?
Very nice of you.
Well, it's still a lot. It's still a lot, yeah.
Squeeze it on.
So.
Hey.
Yeah, right. Good. Any other questions?
We didn't know like the actual tribe name, or is it just like the common name that you
Both.
say when the tribe?
For the waterfowl, I want you to know both. I want you to know both the technical name of the tribe as well as the common or descriptive name of the tribe for the ducks, okay?
Good question.